morning again. My name is Tracy Flood, and as we said earlier, I am the outgoing co-chair for this last year of the Kitsap County Human Rights Council. I am also the current newly elected president of our local NAACP. And I am humbled and honored to be able to take on that role. I've had the pleasure of serving on the Human Rights Council for a number of years now, and while there has been a lot of improvements in certain areas, there's also been a lot of movement backwards. And even more so now is the need for the Kitsap County Human Rights Council, the NAACP, the ACLU, and different organizations that will make sure that individual rights stay individual rights and protections that are needed. I also want to take this opportunity to read our mission statement to acknowledge our Kitsap County Board of County Commissioners, as well as give special thanks to our sponsors. The mission is to advise county government and Kitsap County residents on issues related to discrimination, violence, and harassment based on race or national origin, religion, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or economic status, to promote the equitable treatment of all citizens and to reduce prejudice through the development of prevention policies, education, resources, referrals, and advocacy. A special thanks to our Board of County Commissioners, and a special thanks to our sponsors, and there are table tents on each table that list our sponsors. Our platinum level sponsor is the Kitsap County Board of County Commissioners and the Olympic College Foundation. Our silver sponsor is Olympic College and Sound Publishing. Our bronze sponsor is Michael Foster. Our basic level sponsors include the Kitsap Credit Union, Dean Tinchie, and the Executive Director of the Kitsap County, who is the Executive Director of the Kitsap County History Museum. Without our sponsors, our conference would not be possible. We sponsor a lot of students, and we like to have a balance between adults and students that attend each conference each year, because our children are our future. While adults, we continue to learn, to continue to grow, it's important that that firm foundation of what human rights are is instilled in our children. And with that, I am going to introduce our panel members, and today's youth panel was put together. There were some slight changes that was made because of the snow, but I appreciate these young people and for taking the time and the willingness to be here today, because it's not easy to sit or to stand in front of a group of people. Some you know, some you don't know, but it's even more intimidating to young people. But it gives them the opportunity to be able to grow and further get experience in this area. So for that, I am just overwhelmingly elated and thankful for them. So I will start from right to left. I have Kamaria Vincent, and I also have, next to her is Kadra McGinnis, and next to her is Danielle Bryan. Giving a little bit more information about these young individuals is to include, you have in front of you a very talented middle school competitive dancer in Danielle Bryan. She has competed competitive dance and danced with my daughter at the dance gallery in Port Orchard for a number of years. And she actually has a dance competition today where she'll be doing solo. So her brain is probably on dance a little bit here. And Kadra McGinnis is a senior at Central Kitsap High School. Oh, I did that wrong. What high school? Olympic High School. And but yeah, it's her senior year. She's been involved with sports. She loves her family. She's very close to her brother, and she's very involved in her church. And that's my athlete. I call her the athlete. And Kamaria Vincent, I had the pleasure of attending her orchestra concert. She attends South Kitsap High School. She's a senior and very talented, very involved in her church as well, and very close to her younger sister and family, and just a wonderful spirit and kindness. I'm going to have a seat, and we're going to engage in a conversation so that they don't feel like I'm speaking over them, and I want to make them as comfortable as possible. Okay. I would like to also pick up on the conversation from our keynote speaker and understanding implicit bias, and the overall arching theme of the panel is, in essence, how does these young people see implicit bias in their lives? How does it show up? So I want to start with a definition. What is implicit bias? It's thoughts and feelings that some would say people are unaware of, but is there really a balance between implicit and explicit? The internalized racial oppression that our keynote speaker talked about, you have to think about. So, thank you for saying that. So, I want to begin with a definition, because our overall arching goal is to have our young people here express how does implicit bias show up in their lives. And when we say show up in their lives, show up in their daily lives through school, through their activities, through what they see on television, through their interactions with adults as well as their peers, but just on a general scale. And in order to get them prepared for today's panel, I had them take the Harvard test on implicit bias. And the reason why I had them do that is because the test is one in which you can see different scenarios, and what you think isn't there may be there. But it's a good way to have a dialogue and a conversation that can explore different areas of implicit bias. And starting with the definition of implicit bias being thoughts and feelings are implicit if we are unaware of them or mistaken about their nature. We have a bias when, rather than being neutral, we have a preference for or an aversion to a person or group of people. Thus, the term implicit bias to describe when we have attitudes toward people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. A fairly commonplace example where it frequently shows up is people frequently, as our keynote speaker gave a history of, associate criminality with Black people without even realizing they're doing it. So I'm gonna just ask our panel, and whoever wants to go first, I'll let them choose, to start with how they felt about taking the exam and the exams that they saw because they were tested on implicit bias, and relating it to us on which ones they took and how the results affected them.
Well, I don't think they can hear me.
Okay.
I have to stand up on the
Got plenty of leads, you just blow it.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
So the test like had pictures and words, and I took the test on dark skin to light skin people, and my result was slight automatic preference for dark skin people over light skin people. I didn't really think it related to me because I like, all skin colors in that preference.
All right. So I did 3 different tests, and my first one I did skin tone, also dark skin to light skin people, and my results came back as me having no preference, because to me it doesn't matter who I talk to. If it's a person, I'm going to talk to them, so it doesn't matter. And then I also took age, which was old to young, and I also had no preference, but then I took it again, and it said that I preferred older people than talking to younger people, which to me actually does kind of say who I am, because I'd rather talk to an older person than I would a younger person, just because the simple fact that I think it's more influential to me, I guess, would be talking to someone older than talking to someone younger, since I'd be the same age as them and I already know pretty much everything that young people do. And the last test I took was on disability. And as I took the test, like as you're taking the test, they relate it to able people and disabled people and good and bad, and then there's different words for good and bad. And as you take different tests, there's different words for each test that you take. So I realized as I started taking this test that the words that were on this test for disabled and able people, that as they changed, it was the words that people usually use when they say like things about disabled people, that there was bothersome, they're nasty, and then there was also positive words that they were beautiful and strong people. And then like as I took the test, I didn't realize how things like this occur in your daily life.
So I took age one, which is the old to young, and it said that I'd rather talk to younger people, which kind of describes me because and so like when I was taking it, it was like, I don't know. Like when I was taking it, it kind of felt like me, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it accurately reflected towards me, I guess. I took the dark skin, the light skin one, and it said that, it was I took it a couple times. The first time it said dark skin people, and then it said light skin, which it doesn't really matter to me whether you're dark or light. If you're somebody that I would want to talk to, I guess I'll talk to you. I took the disabled one, and I am friends with a lot of kids at my school who are disabled. And when she was talking about the words and stuff, like saying they're ugly and that they're strong people, yes, I do agree they are strong people. I do hear people make fun of them in the hallways, which I don't like. I also can relate to the dark skin and light skinned test because I am mixed myself. People do tend to make fun of me. They think I'm different. They treat me differently, call me really bad names. It's not good. I also took the weight one, and they also had words that was saying, like, for overweight people, they were ugly. Then for thinner people, they're more appealing, and I don't really agree with that. But I can figure it to that one. Not much.
Related to your
So for the skin tone, I guess because I'm dark skinned, my results came back that I had no preference, and I guess people say that I'm dark, but I really don't care. So I don't know what you want me to. And for disabilities, like Kamaria said, that I see it around the school, and I don't really agree with what people have to say. So usually, for the person that I am, I'll say something to anyone, no matter who they are, age, doesn't matter. I'll say something just to stick up for what I believe in.
So you've had an overall glimpse into some of the tests that are on the Harvard implicit bias website and some of the examples, and understanding what is implicit bias and why it matters. They've relayed kind of some examples from them being in school and to their own personal lives and how skin tone relates to each individual. And also understanding that, is there a preference? When you have a conversation or you see a crowd of people, do you gravitate toward a particular group of people because they look like you, or they may be educated like you, or just in a sense of what is your comfort zone? Because a lot of it stems around, in essence, stereotypes. One of the things that we have to realize and understand is an unconscious thought or attribution relates closely to what, in essence, is a stereotype. Is it influenced by an experience that we've had? So if we gravitate to a particular group of people and coming into the room, is it because you think that they've had similar experiences? Is it a group of blonde ladies that you may go to the blonde ladies or brunettes, or older people versus young people? Do we separate ourselves out as adults because we don't want to engage in conversations with our young people? Are we disconnected with them? Or do we feel that their core values are different from ours? All of these things are things that we think about as stereotypes. Individuals, is it, as I mentioned, social categories? Is it race or gender? Is it your own personal perceptions? But also understanding that implicit stereotypes are an aspect of our social cognitive. Is it when we think attitudes? All of these things come into play. Versus explicit, where stereotypes are directed outwardly toward a particular group of people. And an example of that would be, an explicit stereotype is, would a person think, an example that was given on the Harvard study is, adolescent girls likes to play with dolls and likes to play with makeup. That's an explicit stereotype. So everything is kind of from our learned experiences. You've heard individuals say, is a person born with stereotypes? Is a person born being a racist? Is a person born being biased? Depending on which theories you look at, the majority say, no, it's learned. Learned behavior. So I'm going to go back to our panel and ask them, what do you think can be done about implicit bias? Is there anything that you think you can do as young people to help that? Is there anything that you think that we as adults can do? Is there anything that you feel that should be in the public education system to help with implicit bias?
Thank you. I think adults should know what we go through, like in our daily lives in school. Like me, I had trouble with people because they thought I was different, and they treated me differently than everybody else. I just think, staff members and teachers should I don't know, try to kind of, help us out a little bit and try to understand what we go through day to day. Like bullying is a big deal still, on social media and all that. But sometimes I just feel like teachers and staff members don't really care sometimes, or they can't understand what's going on. So I just think, I don't know, I just think a lot more people need to be informed about things like that.
So I believe that anything can help. That kids can always get help, especially nowadays. It's rough, very, very rough. Going to school every day and seeing the things that I see and talking to some of my teachers. Well, I take an AP psychology class, and talking to my teacher about how a lot of our kids in our school are homeless, and I almost started crying in class just thinking about it because it's sad. But I don't know, any help in this?
So, like she said, anything could help, but at school, some of the kids at my school, at least, they don't really go and hang out with anyone because of the way they dress and the way they look. And I see it happen a lot outside when we go outside. Everyone kind of just looks at them and then walks away. They don't really try and help them. And then, I kind of get that way sometimes, but I try and fix it.
Oh, sorry.
We're a little tangled up. Thank you for your patience, audience. Okay, so we've kind of, again, heard some examples of what they've seen in school, and most importantly, the overarching theme that I've heard is any help would be appreciated. So it's up to us as adults to reach out, to be that example, so that students aren't being differentiated because of how they're dressed or how they look. Because in essence, the comments, again, that were made by our keynote speaker, it's kind of what you're seeing as a classism. If you're in school and you're homeless, you may not be able to dress the same way as that person who has two working parents and they wear the latest Coach attire or the name brand attire and different things that sets them off, sets them apart. And ultimately, we're seeing classism in its finest. And one of the things that you're seeing is what in essence is the terms of the haves and the have-nots. You have the different levels, and those that are in the middle class is being squeezed out. So I think that it's important for us to set the example, to be able to identify things and to encourage those individuals who you, in terms of quote unquote the bully or the ones that are over doing the talking, to encourage them to not do that, but to encourage them to reach out and to be sensitive to those less fortunate, but also to reach out to them and see if there's any help that's needed. Because at this conference, we have a lot of young people from school, we have a lot of educators in the room, and I think this youth panel speaks directly to those individuals as well as any volunteers in the school and all of us as adults, that there's a need, and whether or not they say it, they need our help, and that's important. So I'm gonna take questions from the audience, and the back microphone, as we said before, is available to ask those questions or any comments that you want to make at this time.
Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm a high schooler also. I was just wondering, do you believe there's other ways besides reaching out to adults that teenagers in high school or middle school or even elementary school can defeat this bias and communicate to others to defeat the stigma and the bias around these different cultural groups? Anyone's response?
Okay. Well, I believe that it's not really like, well, it's in the high schools and things, but like Ms. Tracy had said in the beginning, that it comes from somewhere. So some of it's from the parents, so some of it there's really nothing we can do about. And try to guide the parents to do better, I guess.
Yeah, like she said, I just feel like I think it's from the parents. You learn it from home, but some other people might disagree with me. But I just think, you know, kill them with kindness. If people are like bothering you, just kill them with kindness. That's all you can do, and hopefully they'll change.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And I also would say that I think that young people have to understand how powerful they are by coming together in groups and advocating and just organizing, because you have a powerful voice. So if you come together collectively and say, we have a need, because sometimes it's not taught in the home, but it's important as us as educators, us in the community, us as volunteers, that we take on a role that sometimes we have to take on because of the lack of things that happen in the home. So you, as young people, can educate one another, okay? And it's okay to come together and to come to an adult at your school and say, I have some concerns. Find that safe place.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jo, and I'm a retired educator, and I want to direct my question to Kamaria. Do you have a feeling that maybe part of the problem at Kitsap is the immense size, the number of students? Do you think it would seriously help to have that second high school?
I think it would really help, because last year, I was a junior, it was like before the freshmen came to the high school. It was a lot easier for me to go to class, but now like the class sizes are huge. Like we have 30 kids in each class now, so it's kind of hard for all of the teachers to like settle everybody down. So it is, yeah, it's really hard. So I think you need this in high school.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I'm a public educator and I teach your age group, so kudos to you young women for having the courage to be active. I have students in my AP class who refuse to speak because they're hesitant that their voice doesn't matter, and I'm trying every tool in the toolbox to get them to participate. But I've also seen that some students, and I think it has to do with classism, where some students have a higher voice than others. And I've seen it in the reaction of students, even within my own classroom, where when one student speaks, you see the eyes roll, the body language tells us they don't matter. And then when another student speaks, everybody's listening intently because apparently that student is cool. I don't know how the social structure among my teenagers, who's cool and who's not. I happen to think all of you are cool. So how would you like a teacher to address that disparate behavior in the classroom? Because I've kind of got up to here with it, and I'm ready to about explode on my students. And I would like to know, particularly for your shy Danielle, I know that sometimes when an explosive teacher comes in and says, "You must speak," and then I get the reaction of, "Oh, you know." So how do I do that without destroying the student, but at the same time letting them know that this is not acceptable? That's a tough question. I know, but I'll give you an answer.
I think I can answer your question. I'm not sure, but hold on. I don't think I can answer. Can you repeat it?
Sure. So I want to give you the backdrop, but as a teacher witnessing students doing this to each other, how do I, as the adult figure, tell them that's not cool without disparaging the students who are doing it and also not mortifying the student who clearly knows that their voice is not as strong?
Just tell that student, like, your voice matters.
I tell them that, and they still are like, "I'm not talking because clearly I'm not valued here." How do I get the other students to value the voice of the one who's not valued?
Have you talked to the entire class?
Not yet, but I'm about to.
Well, you
And
should.
I think you
I
should.
would like to know how to approach, because my style is very direct and in your face, and that hasn't always boded well. So I want to know if there's a gentler, kinder way of saying, this is BS and it needs to stop.
Well, for me, I was in an ag class this year, and I was in an aquaculture class last year. So my teacher pretty much gave us like a whole class, like an activity to help us with like speaking in front of people. And so I think that kind of helped me because I was that kid who was like very intimidated by people. I still am a little shy in front of people, but I'm getting better at it. But I just think that you need to talk to the whole class and be like, hey, look, it's not cool to be like, oh, whatever, she's talking, so I'm not going to listen. And then when their friends go up there, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to totally listen to this person because they're so cool. But yeah, I just think you should just...
So the direct approach is the best?
Yeah.
Awesome, I can do that. All right, cool. Thank you, and kudos again, because my big struggle are with shy people. I don't know how to get them to realize that they have a voice. Just because we loud people do does not mean that shy, quiet ones don't also have a voice.
Yeah.
And I'm working really hard with that bias. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a retired teacher. I guess that's my first really to be long retired. I did a lot of other things in my life. I have to share with you, young ladies, that I took some of the implicit bias testing also. So I'm going to confess right here that that testing revealed to me that I was slightly hostile toward my own culture. So, I guess I should start watching Duck Dynasty or something like that. But seriously, I was going to ask you, put each one of you all on the spot briefly if I could and ask you, because most of us here are adults and we are obviously seeking guidance. Could each one of you all point to something that you've seen an adult do that particularly impacted your understanding of diversity, either positively or negatively? And then the second question would be, is there any time when you caught yourself thinking, whoa, I really kind of let my guard down there and I wasn't being my best self?
So for the first question, I haven't really seen anything, but I guess the positive thing could be that there's different cultures sitting with each other at different tables. And can you repeat the second question again, please? Sorry.
Yeah, the second question was, has there ever been a time in school or any other setting when you caught yourself, after the fact maybe, exercising some implicit bias that you didn't know you had until it came up?
Yes, I don't think I really have an example because I probably do it about every day, but don't realize I do it. So,
It happens.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God. I will see right now.
Like negatively or positively?
Both.
Okay, well, negatively for your first question, like, well, I have a dad who's black and my mom's white. So, and I'm going shopping with them and then people just stare at us and like glare at us thinking it's like not a good idea for them to be together and they think it's so wrong. But there's not a big issue for them to be together because, okay. So I haven't really seen anything positive. I can't really answer your second question because I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you. For your first question, I don't really know how to answer. But for your second one, in at school, there's one kid at school that gets nasty glares because he doesn't look like anybody else. But sometimes it's from my friends, sometimes it's from me, but my friends. But he doesn't look like everyone else, so people will talk behind his back and will sometimes go up to him and tell it to him. And
Thank you.
So we have time for one more question.
look at the line now.
Hi, I'm Olivia, and I just wanted to make a comment about the question about equal voice in classrooms, because I used to be really, really shy and I refused to talk in classes, but now I've been more open to it and I engage in class discussions. And I think most of it is because I learned to trust people more and my community, and it's this thing called boundary breaking where we just get to know each other and learn each other's stories, because if we realize that everyone's story of more respect to each other, and it's not really a question, but I just wanted to add that because it might be helpful for teachers.
Okay, that was a comment, so if there was one more question, I do have time for one more question. And my two young people said that, oh, okay, there's one person.
Hi. I did hear each one of you say just about anything would help an adult. I'm not an educator, and as a parent, all my children are very young. But I am in the community. What do you think would be helpful? When you say anything would help, what does that look like?
More from adults. I think being a teenager, I'm 18, I think a lot of encouragement from adults helps a lot to try to help them do better, well us, try to help us do better, and not always getting negative comments, because I hear a lot of people say negative things about the way some young kids dress, some of the things that they do, which doesn't really help them try to be better and do better. So.
And we need some guidance too.
Thank you. Does that look like people coming to your school and offering guidance? Does that look like us participating in clubs that you may or may not belong to? What does that look like to you? Where are you looking to get the guidance that you like from the adults that would like to encourage you but don't really have any connection to the education system? What does that look like?
If kids in the school do need help or want guidance, or if the teachers or administrators see that kids need help, I'm pretty sure they have it at every high school, but for my school, they have adult mentors that help and just talk and have conversations with people that need help. And not even in high school, they had it in my junior high that I went to also, so that would be a big part too.
Right, so that is those are the ideas that the adults have, and you feel that those are also good ideas, yes?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So I think that's all the time we have. So if you join me in thanking our younger council members, Maria, Pedro, Lydia,